That $160 bottle sitting behind the bar, the one with the velvet pouch and the gold lettering, holds a secret the liquor industry doesn't want you to know. You've been paying for the bottle, not the whiskey inside it. And it's not just one brand. Across America, millions of people are reaching for bottles that look, feel, and sound premium, while the liquid inside is sourced from industrial distilleries, blended with cheap grain alcohol, or dressed up with caramel coloring to fake decades of aging. Today, we're ripping off the label on 8 of the most overpriced whiskeys in America, whiskeys that charge a premium price for what is, at its core, a budget blend in a very expensive suit. Number 8, the Macallan 12, $80 to $90. Walk into any upscale restaurant in America, ask for a premium scotch, and 9 times out of 10, the bartender will point to the Macallan. It's the whiskey that launched 1,000 "I only drink the good stuff" conversations. At $80 to $90 a bottle, it carries the kind of price tag that makes people assume quality before the cork is even pulled. Here's what the Macallan doesn't tell you at that price point. The bottle is doing more work than the whiskey. Studies in consumer psychology have shown that blind taste tests consistently fail to show any statistically significant preference for the Macallan's liquid over alternatives at half the price. The brand invests heavily in thick, base-heavy bottles, not for structural reasons, but because research confirms that consumers rate pours from heavier vessels as smoother and more complex, even when the liquid inside is identical. That dense glass, that embossed label, the hush-tone narrative about their famous oak casks. It's theater. Experts at publications like Forbes have confirmed that bottles like Glenallachie 12, available around $60, routinely outperform the Macallan 12 in blind tastings, winning gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition and the International Spirits Challenge. The Macallan 12 is a good whiskey, but at nearly $90, you're paying a $30 premium for a name and a heavy bottle. The Macallan isn't selling you better whiskey. They're selling you better packaging. Number 7, Buchanan's 12 Deluxe, $35 to $50. If you've ever been to a party in a major American city, Miami, Houston, Los Angeles, New York, there's a decent chance you've seen a bottle of Buchanan's making the rounds. This blended Scotch whiskey has been masterfully marketed as the premium choice for celebrations, particularly in the American Latino community, where its red and gold label has become a shorthand for "I'm doing well in life." The whiskey inside tells a different story. Buchanan's 12 Deluxe is a grain-heavy blended Scotch bottled at just 40% ABV, scoring a modest 85 out of 100 from Whiskey Advocate, a competent, unremarkable whiskey that functions well as a mixer. For $45 or more, you're getting a bottom-shelf flavor profile dressed in a label that projects wealth. Whiskey reviewers have called it outright budget in blind pours. The Buchanan's narrative is built entirely on aspiration. The brand tells you it's premium. The packaging suggests heritage. But the glass in your hand? It's cheap, column-still grain whiskey wearing a very convincing costume. There are blended scotches at $25 that drink every bit as good, if not better. Number 6, Jameson Irish Whiskey, $30 to $35. It's the most popular Irish whiskey in the world. Ask any bartender in America for an Irish whiskey and Jameson is the first bottle they reach for. That triple distilled mythology, the friendly green label, the cozy Dublin pub imagery. It's one of the most effective pieces of brand storytelling in the spirits world. But here's the thing. Jameson is not crafted in some charming Dublin distillery. It hasn't been since 1975. Today, every single bottle you buy is made at the Middleton Distillery in Cork, a sprawling industrial facility run by Pernod Ricard, one of the biggest alcohol corporations on earth. What's inside? A blend of grain whiskey and single-pot still whiskey, produced at enormous scale to hit consistent price points. Whiskey reviewers who have dug into recent batches describe it as a grainy, economy column-still produced cheap grain whiskey with thin flavor, an overly sweet character, and a general lack of complexity. One reviewer noted a sharp acetone note, raw ethanol, on a recent bottle, a telltale sign of young, unrefined grain spirit rushing to meet demand. Jameson has grown 14% in a single year at times, selling tens of millions of cases globally. At that scale, the craft story they're selling becomes mathematically impossible. You're not buying Irish heritage. You're buying volume production with a shamrock on it. Number 5, proper no. 12, $25 to $30. If you've ever wondered how much brand power a two-division UFC champion can generate, look no further than proper no. 12. When Conor McGregor launched his Irish whiskey brand in 2018, it sold $1 million worth of product in its first month. It was eventually sold to Beckel, the parent company of Jose Cuervo, for a reported $600 million. $600 million. For a whiskey that reviewers describe as having zero complexity and ethanol notes on the palate. Here's the truth about proper no. 12. It's a contract-distilled Irish blend made at the Bushmills facility, bottled at 80 proof with no age statement, built primarily from young grain whiskey and a smaller portion of malt. The whiskey critic community has been largely unkind to it. Not something I'd reach for again to drink neat, wrote one. Another noted the malt content felt minimal, mostly young column still grain spirit racing for cheap production costs. The $600 million valuation had nothing to do with what was in the bottle. It had everything to do with the man on the label. That's not premium Irish whiskey. That's a marketing vehicle wearing a whiskey costume. Number 4, Crown Royal Standard, $25 to $30. Here's a fun experiment. Pull the purple velvet bag off a bottle of Crown Royal and set it down next to a $15 bottle of generic Canadian whiskey. Taste them both blind. A significant number of whiskey drinkers cannot tell the difference. Crown Royal has been one of America's best-selling Canadian whiskeys for decades, commanding over 42% of the Canadian whiskey category in the US market. That purple bag, stitched with gold, whispered about like it's some regal treasure, is one of the most effective pieces of packaging psychology in the liquor industry. It makes you feel like you're holding something special. What you're actually holding is a blend of up to 50 different grain whiskeys, produced at the company's massive Gimli, Manitoba distillery using 10,000 imperial bushels of grain daily. One noted whiskey reviewer described the standard expression as boring and flat with a finish that simply doesn't exist, adding that the fancy packaging makes you think it's going to be something that it isn't. And if that wasn't enough, controversy erupted in 2025 when Crown Royal's parent company Diageo announced it was closing its Amherstburg, Ontario bottling plant and shifting U.S. bottling operations south of the border, enraging Canadian politicians and consumers who had been sold on the proudly Canadian identity for over 80 years. The Ontario Premier literally poured a bottle out on camera in protest. That's how hollow the authenticity story had become. Crown Royal is fine whiskey for a mixer, but you're paying $30 for a bag and a myth. Number 3, Whistlepig 10-year rye, $65 to $80. This is the one that really stings because Whistlepig is expensive, it's respected, and it presents itself as an American craft rye whiskey made on a Vermont farm. The branding is immaculate. The bottle is gorgeous. The story of sourcing the world's finest rye with a legendary master distiller is compelling. It is almost entirely fiction. Whistlepig's founder went on television and told viewers that Whistlepig was a patriotic American whiskey. He was asked directly about competing rye brands aged longer and doubled down. He even made claims about it being the only truly aged rye on the American market. The whiskey was, at the time of launch and for years afterward, sourced entirely from Alberta distillers in Canada. Not Vermont, not America, not from their farm. The brand's own team was eventually forced to come clean. Their words, and admit the liquid was Canadian. All that happened at Whistlepig's farm in Vermont was that they rested and rebottled someone else's whiskey. At $65 to $80 a bottle, you were paying a Vermont craft premium for Canadian industrial rye that Alberta Distillers, a large commercial Canadian operation, was selling in bulk. The bottle looked the part. The story sold the part. The whiskey just came from somewhere else. Number 2, Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey, $15, 20 full size. This one might surprise you not because of the price, but because of what it actually is. And more importantly, what it is not. Fireball is not whiskey. Under US law, whiskey must be bottled at a minimum of 80 proof, 40% alcohol. Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey sits at 66 proof, 33% ABV. Because it contains added sugar and cinnamon flavoring that lower the proof, It legally fails to qualify as whiskey in the United States or Canada. What it technically is a whiskey-based liqueur one step above a schnapps, built on a cheap Canadian grain whiskey base, sweetened up and flavored with artificial cinnamon. And here's where it gets worse. The mini bottle version, those 99-cent shots you find at gas station counters across America, those don't even contain whiskey at all. They're made from malt beverage and wine, then flavored to taste like whiskey. In 2023, a class action lawsuit was filed in federal court arguing that the Fireball mini bottles were outright consumer fraud. The label implied whiskey was inside, and there was none. Fireball built an $863 million brand on a loophole, a fire demon, and the taste memory of atomic Fireball candy. It's marketing genius. It's also not whiskey. And millions of Americans have been ordering a shot of whiskey. Number 1, Johnnie Walker Blue Label, $160 to $200. This is the crown jewel of the fake premium empire. Johnnie Walker Blue Label is arguably the most famous premium whiskey in the world. The sleek blue bottle, the silk paper box, the iconic striding man. The fact that it was, at one point, literally the most expensive whiskey on the shelf. It's gifted at Christmas, ordered at celebratory dinners, and poured with ceremony at business meetings to signal that you've made it. Here's what's actually in the bottle. A blended scotch with no age statement, meaning they are not required to tell you how old the whiskey is. It is artificially colored with E150 caramel coloring to simulate the appearance of extended aging. And its production is done at industrial scale by Diageo, the same corporation that makes Crown Royal, Don Julio, and dozens of other mass-market spirits brands. The famous 1 in 10,000 cask story is marketing copy, not a production standard that's independently verified. Drop a comment below and tell us which bottle surprised you the most. Hit the like button if you think your wallet deserved to know this sooner. Share it with a friend who still buys Blue Label as a gift, and subscribe, because every week we pull back the curtain on the industries that are counting on you not paying attention. We'll see you in the next one.